Delighted to have you, Doctor. Thank you so much for taking this time out. I know what this must have meant
My
to
pleasure.
carve out this much time to have a conversation. I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting.
Doctor, there's a lot of panic that has come up in the last couple of months. I think when we were talking March last year, one of the things that we had relief over was that children are not affected by the coronavirus. This has very quickly changed. How has this happened? How did we not see this coming?
Okay, I agree that most of us felt that the kids were not affected, but we honestly do not know whether they were not affected at all or they were asymptomatic carrier. If we remember in March 2020, we did not have enough medical facilities. We did not have enough testing facilities. We were not very clear about the virus. Since we were not clear about the virus, we did not know what could be the different kind of presentations of the virus.
Mm-hmm.
We also were not very clear about the even today, if you ask me if there is a particular protocol for a given case, the answer would be probably no. We are not very clear, but yeah, we definitely have a better understanding. The health facilities, the testing facilities have scaled up in the whole country, even globally. So we are better placed. Now, coming back to whether kids are getting infected more often now, there is a possibility that the kids are getting a little more severe infection. I have yet to see a child with severe COVID infection, but maybe the severity has gone a bit more than what has happened last year in the first wave. So all those kids who were asymptomatic at that time are presenting with some symptoms. Secondly, some of the kids are presenting with even abdominal pain. Some of the kids are presenting with diarrhea, vomiting. Mm-hmm. All this in the beginning in March wasn't known that COVID-19 infection in children can manifest that way. During the first wave itself, we realized that some of the patients were coming with diarrhea, vomiting, abdominal pain also. So a better understanding of the clinical picture, more testing facilities. All of us know, including you, that the number of tests done in May, June 2020 and the number of tests done per day now, there is no comparison. So when we are testing more, obviously we're getting more infection.
Right.
So I think there is a probability that the kids are affecting more because there are so many mutations that the virus has undergone in last 1 year. Or there is a chance that a slightly increased severity of the infection is making more and more kids symptomatic, and that's why they are picked up. More tests are done, so more kids are picked up. These are the three probabilities. But we are not worried. The good news is the kids are not getting severe disease.
Right. Right. That was going to be my next question, that, what is like the most severe case of COVID that you have seen in a child? How has it manifested in, in these kids?
There are two things. One is the COVID infection and one is post-COVID complications. So in kids, as far as the COVID infection is concerned, the smaller the kid, less of the chance of getting a severe disease. But I have seen severe disease presenting with high-grade fever, with breathing problem and cough in adolescents, in teenagers. And if we are talking about teenagers, they are as big as me. They're very tall. They're 70, 80 kilos, they're 16-year-old boys. So those children have shown severe signs.
Okay.
But a small child, 4 or 5-year-old or a 1-year-old or 8-10-year-old hasn't shown any severe disease. Now, some of these kids have come back, or they have come with a different presentation where some of the vital organs are affected, and they were actually never tested positive for the COVID.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that when we are asking the parents about all the probabilities, and we get to know that one of the parents or both the parents were positive about a month back or 6 weeks back, then we think, oh, let us check the antibodies in this child. And when we check the antibodies, we realize the antibodies were positive. So that means the child had COVID in the past and now is coming to us with the post-COVID complication. Now, let's not go into the terminology of those things. It presents with the inflammation in various vital organs in the body. And whichever organ is affected in a given child, the child presentation based, clinical presentation based on that. These children give us tough time. Most of these children land up in intensive care unit and they have to manage. But now there is an understanding of the disease, and I think almost everybody is safe. We do not lose a child.
That's not sounding comforting at all. I'm glad that you're sharing this honestly, because this is the whole point. Do you feel that science and research and development is being able to keep up with this? Because from last year to now, where we thought that children are not going to get affected, now they're affected. There are also, implications of side effects and post-COVID complications. And there is absolutely no certainty of, where this is going to go. So, as someone in the thick of things, do you feel that there is enough research and development happening on this front so that we parents can have a peaceful night's sleep?
I think every patient is an experience globally. There are various email groups, there are various WhatsApp groups where many intensivists across the country and across the globe share their experiences. I'm also a member of a few WhatsApp groups where we do have intensivists from different tertiary level institutes of our country, even in US and UK. And whenever anybody finds an unusual case, or whenever anybody finds a response to a particular protocol or a particular medicine, we share with others the whole clinical history of the case. I think everybody is wiser as compared to 2020. We all know the options available to us. If you ask us that whether enough research has been done, I would say it's an ongoing process. The research is on. Research itself is an ongoing process. And in coming few months, we'll have a little better idea about dealing with the virus. But I think we have enough experience and some evidence at present to deal with this infection in children.
Sure. Thank you, doctor. So what should parents typically expect if they see this, if their child contracts the virus, in terms of testing procedures, in terms of symptoms, and then treatment? How does this play out?
Okay, now, if I have seen various combinations of presentation in a given family. So we have a family, let's consider we have a nuclear family, husband, wife, 2 kids, and a household. So we say it's highly infectious, and especially during the second wave, we all think that the virus is more infectious as compared to what it was in first wave. But even during the second wave, we have seen where the husband is positive, the wife is not. Positive, the husband is not.
Yes.
Both are positive, kids are negative. Kids are positive, parents are negative. All are positive, house help is negative. House help is positive and the whole family is negative. So all this happening. Now, honestly speaking, I cannot explain that if the virus is so infectious, then how under one roof, and most of us have a small house. We have 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom, and 4 or 5 or 6 members are staying in that. How all were not infected? And when we have done the follow-up of these families, the negative remained to be negative even after 2 weeks. They never got. So whether it was a kid or was an adult, they didn't get. Now, as far as testing for children is concerned, if any child is symptomatic who comes with a fever, and we are not finding a localizing sign on examination of such a child, that means localizing sign where we get a clinical sign on examining the child. For example, tonsillitis, we see infection of the tonsil. If we find signs of abdominal infection, or if we find some sign of some other infection, where we call it as localizing sign. A particular sign which is pointing towards a possibility of an infection at a particular place. If we don't find that, and a child comes with fever, with or without body ache, headache, cough, cold, diarrhea, vomiting, anything, we advise that you do the COVID test.
COVID test. Okay. Okay.
Now, if any of the parent or any of the contact is positive, or if a child was playing with some other child who turned out to be positive, even if the child is asymptomatic, we advise that after 5 or 7 days, you do a COVID test on this child. Because it is important. If the child is asymptomatic, we are not going to give any medicine to the child. But it is important for us to tell the parents that you have a contact in the family, so you be careful. Or anybody else in the family develops a symptom.
Right.
Maybe this child was exposed to somebody, has got an infection, he is asymptomatic, but he is given to other family member who becomes symptomatic. So contact tracing, testing is very important. Treatment, most of the children get better on symptomatic treatment.
Okay. So you're saying you're treating the fever, or you're treating the pain, whatever the symptoms the child is complaining of.
Yeah, for a small child will only come with the fever and irritability because he can't point at headache or he can't say I'm having body ache. A grown-up child can tell us that head is paining, body is paining. Old and may be present, may not be present. Some children, little older children are present with even breathing problem. So very presentation.
Okay, so treated as per the symptom that is manifesting.
Right.
Okay, Doc, you mentioned that, the virus has hit back in a slightly more severe way. What did you mean by that? Are you saying that it has kind of mutated and the whole presentation might have changed? Are you saying that it is more widely spreading? Or do you mean that it is even more deadly than before?
Now, if we look at the number of cases, if we see 2020 and we compare it to 2021, or we compare the first wave with the second wave, the number of cases have increased much faster in 2021 as compared to 2020. But we have to see the other side of it. In 2020, the whole of country has undergone lockdown at a stage when we had few hundred patients, very few patients. And that lockdown has helped the country to scale up the health facilities.
Yes.
If we had not done a lockdown at that time, there was a possibility, I'm not exaggerating, that the whole medical fraternity was probably wiped out.
Oh my gosh.
Because the medical fraternity is at exposure at any point.
Yes.
I remember that in beginning, in March and April, many of us have seen COVID patients even without PPE, even without N95, because those things were not freely available. Now it's freely available. So
yes.
See from where we have gone where, and lockdown has helped in that. Now this time, when the second wave has hit our country, there is no lockdown. And I'm very sorry to say, but many of our citizens are not behaving responsibly. So when you have precaution, the government, I would say the central government, state government, local authorities, everybody is giving instructions what is expected out of a citizen.
Right.
But are we doing our bit? The answer is definitely no.
I completely echo that sentiment, doctor. And, please don't apologize. And if you were to not mince your words at all, what would you tell these people out there? What would you tell parents and everyone out there who's not taking these things seriously? Because there have been good Samaritans, there have been people talking about this all the time, trying to educate people, trying to create awareness, but somehow rules and regulations are not being followed. What do you want to say to them?
I think I'll put it this way. Very easy to say the government is not doing the job. Now, let's understand the city of Mumbai with a population of almost 2 crores, close to 2 crores. I don't know exact figure. Definitely. And if you look at the cops, we have 40,000 to 80,000, including traffic police, civil police, etc. Now, do you think that if all of us decide not to follow the guidelines, those 40 or 80,000 odd people can control us? I think it's unfair to blame them. So many cops have lost their lives when they were on the road.
Yes.
So it has to come from us. The government has given a direction. The authorities have given a direction. ICMR, NCDC, the research bodies, the implementation bodies of our country have given a direction. It is our duty to follow. If we don't follow, I think we are responsible. Nobody else.
Those were very kind words, very gentle words. If I was asked to speak to people who are not following rules, it would not have been so kind. All right, Doc, back to kids. What age group do you feel is most affected, even within children? We have newborns, and then we have pre-K kids, primary, then there are teenagers, and then young adults. So have you seen a trend there where a particular age group, is more affected?
I think during the first wave, if we see, it was elderly people above 65, they
Yes.
were affected more. And the people who had comorbidity like high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes mainly, those were affected more as compared to healthy young adults. Kids were hardly seen. Now, in the second wave, I have seen many kids. In fact, if I'm honest enough to tell you that in last 1 month, I have seen more number of kids with the COVID RT-PCR positive than what I saw in last 1 year. So that means I'm already saying that it's more than 12 times higher.
Yeah.
I'm not the only pediatrician. There are many more in the city. There are many more and I'm sure the experience with all of them is more or less the same. Now, even now, the elderly are at risk. The people with comorbidity like diabetes, hypertension, heart disease are at risk. The people who are on immunosuppressive medicines are at risk. Not all of them, but many of them. But youngers are also affected. The people in the age group of 30s and the age group of 20s are also getting positive, and some of them are really having an adverse outcome. As far as pediatric population is concerned, the children between 10 to 18 or 10 to 19, whatever we say, that age group is more affected than the children below 10 years.
Okay.
And even the severity of the disease is higher or is more in the age group 10 to 19 as compared to 0 to 10. And if you ask me, what is the youngest patient you have seen? I've seen the 4 months with a positive COVID.
No,
but
as an
asymptomatic,
I can
we did the test because the mother was positive and she was breastfeeding the baby and she wanted to know what do I do with the baby.
My God, how hard. Some stories are just so hard to talk about. I do have a couple of patients whose 5-year and younger little ones have contracted the virus. And one of them was, in fact, even hospitalized. But I think that brings us to an important point, because this particular kid had a vulnerability, a health vulnerability. So what would you say to parents whose children already have certain health complications, comorbidities, or they already suffer from certain other allergies, complications, etc.? What would you say to them? Should they be more careful? Or you feel that, it's across the board, everybody needs to follow the same precautions?
No, I think the children who have comorbidity needs to be looked after more. They have to be more cautious. They have to take care. And whatever the universal COVID-19 precautions, I think the same precautions should be followed. Okay. There is no extra precaution for them.
All right. Doctor, is there any amount of counseling that is being done for the parents who are coming in, with or without COVID symptoms in their children? Or is there some kind of handout that you're giving them that please read this, you need to follow certain rules, certain precautionary measures? Because like we are talking, there are some children, some families, some people who are actually really suffering because a lot of people are not taking these rules and regulations seriously. They may feel they are not contracting the disease, they are asymptomatic, but the point of the possibility of them carrying it, that is just not sinking in. So what is it that we can do as practitioners to actually create this kind of awareness? Your clinics are full, I know that as personal experience. Are we giving people handouts? Are we giving them counseling? What is happening on that front?
I think you are a better person to answer that. But I would still say one thing. It was good that you said counseling of the parents, and you didn't say counseling of the children.
Absolutely.
See, parents are controlling the family, no matter what.
Yes.
All their life. In the city of Mumbai, mainly when we have nuclear families, when husband and wife both are working, all our life we had a complaint that we don't have enough time to spend with the kids. Now, most of us are working from home. I think we have more time to spend with the kids.
Now,
Are we spending?
now the complaint is flipped.
The question is, are
Too
we
much
spending enough time with the kids?
Yeah.
So now, when I'm talking about counseling, why? If I have to ask you, if I were to tell me one measure or one change in the lifestyle that you want to make in everybody's life today, look forward to a healthy lifestyle, I think that would be decrease the screen time. And if you agree to this decrease the screen time, then why every school is insisting on online teaching? I want to understand. The children want to go into business, children want to become doctor, they want to become pilot, they want to become engineer, they want to become lawyer, they want to become chartered accountant, they want to explore other possibilities. Our generation was different. Now they have lots of exposure, lots of opportunities. A child who's in 4th standard today, a child who's in 6th standard today, a child who's in 7th standard today, even 8th and 9th, if he does not go to school for 2 years, if he just promoted for 2 years, what has he lost in the life? Come on. I used to feel when I was a child, when I was in 8th standard, 7th standard, I used to ask my teacher, I still remember, sir, you tell me, what are you teaching me in history? How is it going to help me in my life? At that time, at that age, I used to ask the same question I ask the school today. You are teaching online? When I talk to the parents, that please decrease the screen time, doc, what do you do? These many hours are only for the school teaching. What are that? That's one. So that has to come from the authorities, the policymaker, no teaching online. Then comes, then when you are at home, you spend time with your own child. You can involve in interaction, you can develop some creative activities, you can develop some physical activities, and you can play with them. I read a very lovely quote long back, I always quote it. A child is saying that please tell my dad that he is the most favorite toy of mine.
Oh.
Now he's at home all the time, he's working from home, spare some time, play with him, he's following you.
Yes.
That is more important. So that is what we need to counsel the parent. Decrease the screen time, give more time to your child, your interaction. For me, the mother and father are the best teacher. And if this pandemic has given the time for all of you to be together, utilize it. Spend time with the children. They don't need anybody else.
100%, doctor. I think from last year, every time we're talking to parents, their concerns are my child's social skills, my child's, is this going to be a hard stop for my child in terms of education? What about his physical development? What about this subject, this future, etc., etc.? And, it's taken us so much time to actually start getting parents to see the good in this situation, however hard, and focus on really raising the relationship, which is such a huge opportunity in disguise, coming in a very, very painful way. But you're completely bang on that children today have been inundated, very unfairly inundated with so many issues. So we were to put ourselves in their shoes. They have online school to do, then they have parents at home, at all times. They're not able to meet their friends, which is actually very, very important for them. They're confused, they're struggling, there's fear, there's anxiety. They're at home, they're getting moody, cranky, even addicted to games. There's a lot of sibling rivalry issues coming up. Children are becoming angry and acting out in terms of screaming or, even hitting behavior. So, of course, this is a plea of distress. It's coming from a place of pain. And it's very important for parents to actually just put everything aside and see, address, look at, empathize, accept the difficulties that children are facing. And like you rightly said, there is no substitute for time with children. I think just raising that connect, not raising the child, because, we really take that too far. But really raising and nurturing that connect is so, so important. And if there's anything good that could come out of such a difficult time in humanity globally, it should be this one. Doc, we can go on and on when it comes to parenting and psychology, but I still have a couple more important questions to address, just so we can keep some panic at bay. Vaccines haven't been tested on children yet, although I really fail to understand why we didn't start earlier. Maybe you can throw some light on that. But when do you see we will safely be able to say that, okay, like, how we have a chickenpox vaccine or or an HPV vaccine for children, there will be something safe to give our children so that they can get back to what we think is normal for them?
See, presently, the COVID vaccine, which is available to all of us, is licensed to be given to all the individuals who are above 18 years of age. So, as you rightly said, there is no vaccine for the pediatric age group. There is a vaccine which is under trial, the phase 1, which would be licensed if it's proven effective for 12 years and above. There is no vaccine being tested even now for children below 12 years of age. Now, even the vaccine which is being tested or is under trial for 12 years and above, if you see all the phases of research and it's coming in the market, it probably would hit the market in 2022, not in 2021. Mm-hmm. So we are not expecting any vaccine in 2021. Otherwise, also rationally, if you think, simply because the vaccine is not studied in children, therefore it's not licensed to be given to children.
Right.
Obviously, when you do a trial, you do a research, you see more vulnerable population first, where you test, and in the pediatric and adult population, you first try and test in adults. So that's how it started. Mm-hmm. If we even now start doing the trials in pediatric, by the time the vaccine is licensed to be given to children below 12 or below 18, I think the pandemic would be on the way down. Because the vaccine is going to play an important role to control this pandemic. Whatever we are feeling today, whatever we are talking today, but I think the vaccine will play an important role.
Yes.
And if you're talking about 2022, I don't have a courage to see the same kind of waves in 2022. Yes. I think it will be much better, much more controlled. And there would definitely be herd immunity also.
I'm happy to hear that you feel quite optimistic about this, doctor, that you're looking at 2022. I mean, it took us 20 years to get something like polio out of the country, to actually declare our nation polio free. So if you're saying another year and a half, 2 years to hang in there, and hopefully we'll have a vaccine for children by then, I think we have reason to be grateful. I actually didn't have such a positive take on it earlier.
Polio was a different case, but if you look at all the pandemics that the world has seen, we see every 100 years coincidentally, 1920, 2020, 1820. So most of these pandemics lasted for about a couple of years. Right. So this virus is different, polio is different. So we expect this virus also to last for about 2-3 years. 1 year is gone, 1 year we are into, and maybe next year.
This is a question that every parent is asking, right now. When will our children go back to school?
I think it's not safe to send the children to school today, and it's not required. That was my answer earlier when we were talking about counseling. Why do you want to send them to school for 2 years? Just don't send them to school. You teach at the home, and I'm sure that every one of you will be a better teacher. Please remember, we're talking to an educated class. Yes. They know it better. You know your son better than anybody else.
100%.
Second, when you're teaching your son or your daughter at home, it's 1:1 interaction.
Yeah.
And in most of the school, when a teacher is teaching the students, it's 1:20 or 1:40. Where you expect better attention? It's so simple. We have to just think. So when we have such a fantastic teacher available at home, can play so many roles, why do I need to send a child to this school? But yes, if you start sending to the school, the number of patients will multiply. Again, looking at the nature of the disease in this pandemic, I'm not worried much about the kids. Most of them, or maybe all of them, will have mild to moderate disease. It's Whenever a child goes to school, they get influenza also. We treat them for 3 to 5 days and it gets all right. Those things, whether it's influenza, it's malaria, it's dengue, it's typhoid, it's pneumonia, we have all accepted them. And therefore, we are not worried much. This infection has suddenly come in. It's behaving very strangely, especially among the adults, and therefore we are worried about our kids. So even if a child has a mild infection, I'm not much worried. But if he has infection and he gives it to elderly people in the family, they may have a bad outcome. That is my fear. So once we start school, children get more infection, they get cross infection, they give it to many other kids. Those kids give it to their families, their elderly people in the family. How will we deal with them?
Absolutely.
The number will multiply unbelievably. Therefore, there is no point starting.
All right, Doctor, I have, been practicing now for, like with you also, I've been practicing now for 17, 18 years, and it has been a battle to try and convince the medical fraternity that there needs to be, your prescription needs to have psychological counseling or therapy on it, for parents, for children. I want to understand from you, do you feel that it's happening? Do you feel that there still is a long way before we can get there? And if so, then why? Why is there this dearth of acceptance amongst the medical fraternity, where they are not able to see the significance of psychological work?
So let me analyze this way. First thing is accept the problem. So identify it. First, you accept that the problem exists both for the parents as well as for the medical fraternity. And then once you have accepted that the problem is existing, then you look for it. Once you look for it, you identify. I'll give a very simple example. A mother comes with a 3-year-old child who is not talking. A pediatrician happened to realize, looking at the child when he was examining, there is something missing here. And he happened to ask the mother, is your child talking? Does he interact with you? Does he have an eye contact? Doctor, my husband also, my mother-in-law was saying he started talking at 4 years. So maybe he's going on father. So here, the mother hasn't yet accepted that there is a possibility of a behavior issue. Then comes the pediatrician. He said, now, if I have to convince this mother, I'm very blunt here, then means I have to invest 15 minutes. And there are 4 patients, 5 patients, 10 patients, 20 patients waiting out. Absolutely. Is it worth? She's not going to listen to me. Okay, let's see next visit. Let's see after 2 months, 6 months. And the things are just missed. Many of us feel, honestly, that when we want to refer a patient for counseling, when we want to refer a patient to look into the behavior of the child, we have very few people in the city. And I'm talking about the city of Mumbai, the metro. It's not only the financial capital of the country, it is the medical capital of the country. Right. The best of the consultants, the best of the facilities, and we're lacking here. So 1, we haven't accepted there is a problem. Yeah. 2, because we haven't accepted, we don't look for it and we don't identify it. And 3, even if we identify it, we are really missing out. We don't have number of people who can actually help you. That's right. That's right. So we really need to scale it up.
There needs to be more conversation around mental health because, Doc, let's look at it this way. A simple act of aggressive potty training can impact a child's personality, a child's cognitive development, emotional regulation, eventually leading to, I don't know, maybe higher cortisol levels, eventually leading to disease. And so you see the whole cycle, the whole relationship is just not well understood or accepted. Like you rightly said, it's not accepted, it's not identified. And how can we create awareness around this has been a big battle. And we do feel that patients listen to their doctors a lot. And so, if a doctor was to prescribe 4 sessions, or 6 sessions, or you need to talk to someone, or the next time you come to me, you need to have met someone, just done a sanity check, just one conversation with a psychologist, we might get better opportunities to be able to talk to families.
I think we have to work from two sides of this. As you rightly said, the policymaker, the authorities, the school, college, etc., have to make the people aware that there are issues and we need to deal with them. At the same time, who are into the field, they have to come forward. That yes, we do exist. It's not that we don't. Now, you are into the field. Honestly speaking, if I have to refer someone in an area where you are not there, and the patient asks me, doctor, मुझे कोई local बताओ इधर इस area में, मेरे को Bandra नहीं जाना है. I'm lost. So there has to be some way where we make the presence of the counselor, psychologist, whatever you label, whatever you are looking at,
yes,
visible. Make them visible. Yes, they do exist. There are good people. They are going to help you, which will make a significant impact on the ultimate outcome of the child.
You're absolutely correct. The country in many ways is not able to even retain a lot of therapists. There's an immediate outflux, speech therapists, occupational therapists, they pass out and then they go abroad. There isn't either enough work or recognition or whatever for them within the city. There has to be more people who are able to sustain this kind of practice. You're absolutely correct. I mean, there is a dearth of active practitioners, but I mean, that's a whole other conversation. Why? Because they do have so many struggles of their own in terms of getting a significant amount of work, in terms of just being able to function without bureaucracy and political agendas interfering, with our degrees and whatnot. Okay, Doc, I know I've taken a lot of your time. But I think another thing that parents, just quickly to wind up the conversation, parents would love to know, are there some things that can help them safeguard their kids from this virus? At least you've established that children are not getting very severe symptoms. You've also told us how you're treating them. You've also told us that if your children have any vulnerabilities, you need to be even more careful. Are there any immunity builders, any practices, any precautions, anything that you would recommend that parents start doing to be able to keep kids safe?
Yeah, first of all, the term immunity build-up or immunity booster is misused.
Mm-hmm.
So there are preparations available in the market as immunity booster. They have no meaning. So we have to understand when we are talking about immunity booster, a normal healthy child will have a good immunity. Where we are missing.
Mm-hmm.
One thing is, if we are talking about Mumbai, there are non-vegetarian people, there are vegetarian people. And vegetarian people do have zinc deficiency. Zinc deficiency is very common amongst vegetarians. And zinc deficiency does affect immunity adversely, not against COVID, but against many infections. And the research is on where the role of zinc supplement in various infections is identified.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, in Mumbai, all high-rise, hardly any sun, vitamin D deficiency is common. And vitamin D also is considered that this deficiency can affect immunity adversely. So if we are looking at immunity booster, rather than thinking about boosting it up, get it to the normal level.
Right.
Supplement zinc, supplement vitamin D. But again, remember, zinc supplementation in a dose that is advised to you by the pediatrician for a child is okay. But vitamin D supplementation can be seen in two different ways. One is a daily low dose, which is the maintenance dose, which you give to your child is harmless. It's fine, you can give. But if you want to give the therapeutic dose or a high dose to treat a deficiency, you cannot give it without doing the blood test and without documenting low vitamin D. Because vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. Its excess also is dangerous. You can't give it. So vitamin D supplementation and zinc supplementation under supervision is definitely important. Vitamin C, which is the most commonly used, I would say has a divided opinion. If at all vitamin C has a role in COVID, we are talking about in a very severe COVID and intravenously use very high dose of vitamin C, having a 500 milligram tablet on a daily basis really does not help. And the last thing is a good nutrition, good protein intake, good healthy food, good nutrition. If I am having good nutrition, I'm sure my immunity is good. So I look at the immunity booster from this point. Correct deficiencies, eat healthy, and rest assured that your immunity is good.
Lovely. Very, very helpful, Doctor. You put it out there in such clear terms that these are the things that we really need to look at in terms of helping our children with their immunity. Not going crazy, ordering immunity supplements, which is happening almost with every other parent that I'm talking about. And if I may add, while it is incredibly hard, it is so important for children to also stay physically active well within the house. That's very important. Sleep is so important. And yes, reduced screen time also, I feel, is really, really connected to, because that's connected to the kind of food choices they make, or the quality of sleep, or their mood. And I just feel that this needs to be approached in a holistic manner. So thank you for this. This has been extremely helpful. And I think to be able to actually physically be able, come and see you and have our usual chats and conversations. I do hope this is behind us soon.
And I'm so happy that you're doing it to create awareness about COVID-19. Well done. Keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you. Learned from the best.